Man, it's so sad reading all these sad coral stories. I barely even know what a coral is. If only I had some sort of a marine biologist and wildlife filmmaker I could talk to.
Hey there, I'm Zak Cole, marine biologist and wildlife filmmaker. Do you want to know about coral? Because I got one to show you right here.
I thought corals were big like this.
You're right, but do you know why? An individual coral is called a polyp, and polyps live in a big group called a colony. Each colony is growing by secreting limestone around them. And when you have a bunch of coral colonies all living together, growing and building, they form a coral reef.
Wait, so which one is the coral? The polyp or the colony or the reef?
Exactly!
But what even is a coral?
Guess!
I don't know, maybe a rock or a plant?
Nope! They're an animal. An animal that thinks it's a plant but acts like a rock.
That's not an animal. It doesn't have a face or legs or move around.
It's based on the shape of their cells. Rocks don't have cells. Plant cells have a cell wall, and animal cells look like this. If we can compare our coral cell, you'll see that corals are indeed animals. No faces required.
Okay, so why do you say they think that they're a plant?
So inside the polyps, there live these colorful, independent algae cells called zooxanthellae, which not only give corals all their pretty colors, but also shares food with the corals that they create by photosynthesizing sunlight, just like a plant. The zooxanthellae gives the coral polyp some of the food that it generates with photosynthesis, and the coral polyp gives the zooxanthellae a place to live.
Wow, that sounds really complicated. Is there some sort of human-centric analogy you could use to compare this complicated situation to something that a non-marine biologist and wildlife filmmaker might understand?
It's like letting one of your friends live inside of your house, but in exchange for living with you, they have to occasionally cook for you and share some of their groceries. We call this process symbiosis.
And you're sure this isn't a rock?
No, but they do create rock, specifically limestone. Remember, a single coral colony is made up of several thousand polyps all living together, growing and secreting limestone. It's kind of like an ant colony if all of the ants had cemented themselves in place.
Okay, but the corals can't move around and catch anything. They're stuck in place. You said that the zooxanthellae only give them some of their food. You can't live off of whatever your roommate's willing to share with you, can you?
You think it'd be hard for them to get food if they can't move around. But corals have a few tricks to eat. In the ocean, there's lots of tiny particles and plankton floating around in the water. If you can filter them out, you can eat them, which is what corals do, making them a kind of filter feeder.
I might not be a marine biologist, but I have seen SpongeBob. I know that plankton wouldn't just let a coral eat him.
That is true, which is why many corals feed with sticky tentacles, which are each lined with stinging cells called nematocysts, just like their cousin, the jelly.
Okay, all of this is really overwhelming, and it's great to know what a coral is. But I still don't understand, why are corals important? Is it because they make oxygen whenever they photosynthesize?
That is one way that we benefit, but here are a few others. There's about 120,000 square miles of coral reef on Earth. That's about the size of 2 Floridas, and 25% of all fish species live a portion of their life there. Imagine if 1/4 of the people you've ever met didn't exist because there wasn't a Florida for them to live at. And because of the way that corals grow their reef structures over time, they act as a natural barrier to storms, waves, and even hurricanes before they hit the land.
If they form a barrier to protect us, is that why some reefs are called barrier reefs?
Exactly.
All right, now I've heard a little bit about coral bleaching, but I don't understand, why would anyone go pour a bunch of bleach on coral?
Coral bleaching has nothing to do with bleach. It's a process where the colorful zooxanthellae that live inside a coral polyp leave. Without their zooxanthellae, the coral polyps are transparent, and their limestone is white, making the entire coral colony look like it's been bleached.
Why would the zooxanthellae leave like that? Isn't that bad for both of them?
Well, it's usually related to stress, which can be caused by disease or toxins in the water, or maybe the water itself is too warm or too acidic. Remember, corals can't move away to get away from those stressful conditions.
So the zooxanthellae just need a vacation from whatever's stressing the coral out.
Exactly. Some people think that a bleached coral is a dead coral, but that's not true. They can actually survive for a few weeks without them, and if water conditions improve in that time, the coral can pick up new zooxanthellae floating around in the water.
You mentioned diseases earlier, but what kind of a disease can a coral catch?
Unfortunately, there's a lot of diseases that affect them. In fact, right now, corals are going through their very own pandemic due to a nasty thing called Stony coral tissue loss disease. All those little tiny coral polyps that make up a coral colony essentially melt, which makes them, What started as an outbreak in 2014 in South Florida has now spread all over the Caribbean. It's really devastating our reef-building corals. One species, the pillar coral, is now extinct in the wild, with the only known survivors living in coral rescue programs.
Oh my God, that's horrible. How is it hurting them?
Unfortunately, after 10 years, we still don't know what's causing stony coral tissue loss disease. It's probably a bacteria or a virus, but we just don't know.
We don't know? What do you mean we don't know? How are we supposed to stop this if we don't know what it is?
We can't. And until we figure out how to stop it, the best chance wild corals have of surviving is breeding them in controlled environments. Just like with what the program at SeaWorld's Coral Rescue Center is doing, actually breeding corals in controlled habitats in order to increase their genetics and hopefully create a gene that makes them resistant to the diseases. I've actually got that coming up as my next video. And you can watch it right here.